Hello everyone, welcome to the Learn with Sandra show channel. I'm Alexandra and it's so good to have you back on this channel today. So in today's video we are going to be tackling the JAMB past question for the subject literature in English year 2024, and we'll be solving 20 questions. So question 1 to 20. So let's jump right into it. Question 1. Okay, so according to the exam above, football is dash. So this question is meant to test your comprehension skills. Okay, so how well can you interpret the passage? How well can you derive the main theme or deduce the main theme, right? So all you need to do is read the passage and understand it. So you can find the answer just in the first sentence. Football is the only sport on earth that can be considered truly global. So truly global communicates a universal game. So option D is the best answer to this question. But when you take a look at option C, it looks like it could be the answer, right? You know, popular but cheap, because in the passage we see simple and inexpensive. But then option D is the best answer because it is explicitly stated in the passage, right? Number 2, the author's tone and language, you know, shows the ability, the unique ability of football, and the fact that it goes beyond, you know, geographical location or cultural boundaries or geographical boundaries, right? So the answer to this question is option D, a universal game. Question 2. So the rhetorical device used in the exam above is dash. The answer to this question is option D, parallelism. What is parallelism? Parallelism is the repetition of similar grammatical structure. Okay, so what is the similar grammatical structure in this excerpt? Now when you take a look at the excerpt, you see to investigate, to conciliate, to hold hearings, to order, to direct. These are called infinitives. What are infinitive? Infinitive is a combination of the preposition to plus a verb. Okay, so they are called infinitive or infinitive phrases, or to infinitive, right? So parallelism are used to create emphasis. They are used to make sentences effective and cohesive. Okay, so as you can see in the excerpt, it is used to list the commissioner's power, the commission's power, okay, to investigate, to conciliate, to hold hearings, and all of that. So when we say irony, irony is saying the opposite of what you mean. When we say personification, it is giving the attributes of humans to non-human beings. When we say hyperbole, hyperbole is the use of exaggeration. So the best answer to this question is option D, parallelism. Question 3. Now there are some questions that you don't need to think too hard to solve, and this is an example of such question: rhyme scheme, just like you have rhyme in English language. Okay, so you must not fail this question. It is that simple. So what do you need to solve this question? 2 things. Okay, 1, the letters of the English alphabet, A, B, C, D. Yes. The second thing you need is just concentrate on the last sound of the last word in each line. So there are 5 lines in this excerpt, right? Now let's take a look at the last word. The last word in line 1 is road. What is the last sound? The. We take letter A. So we go to line 2. The last sound is R in star, right? So that takes letter B. Then you go to line 3, right? What is the last word? Road. What is the last sound? The. It takes A because it is similar to line 1. Okay, so you go to line 4. What is the last word? Far. It is also R sound. That is the last sound, right? It takes B. Then you move to line 5. Quiet. It ends with T, right? So that is completely different. So it takes letter C. So if you have another line, say line 6, and it has a different sound, it will take letter D. So the answer to this question is option B, A, B, A, B, C. Question 4. So the collection of images within a literary work is referred to as dash. The answer to this question is imagery. So imagery is the collection of images that appeals to a person's senses. Okay, it is used to create a mental picture, and it appeals to our senses: sense of sight, sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of smell. It is used to describe a scene, an event, okay, and it appeals to our senses. So that's one unique definition of imagery. So the answer is option A. When we say images, we think of image as a single visual product, right? So it's not the ideal answer. In literary work, it is called imagery. Okay, so when we say symbolism, is the use of symbol, and anything can serve as a symbol, right? Objects, events, characters, they can all be symbolic. So far they have a deeper meaning, right? So when we say caesura, caesura is a pause within a line of a poem. So it is usually marked by punctuations like full stop, commas, semicolons. So the best answer to this question is option A, imagery. Question 5. So the leading character in a literary work is dash. The answer to this question is a protagonist. So a protagonist is the leading character. Okay, when we say antagonist, antagonist is one who opposes the protagonist. Okay, when we say villain, villain is a type of protagonist. And I think I've gotten a lot of questions regarding the difference between antagonist and villain. A villain is a type of protagonist that is deliberately evil. So not all antagonists are villains. So think of it this way, not all antagonists are deliberately evil. So villains are the extreme version of it. They are deliberately evil and very malicious. Okay, so when we think of anti-hero, so this is one who lacks heroic qualities like morality, integrity, and all of that. So an example of this is in one of your recommended texts, The Wuthering Heights, right? Heathcliff is a protagonist, but while he's a protagonist, his obsessive love for Catherine leads him to be cruel and vengeful. So the answer to this question is option A, protagonist. Question 6. Okay, so a long narrative poem that relates heroic exploits is dash. The answer to this question is definitely epic. Epic references heroic deeds. Okay, it also references legends, people that we generally consider to be heroic, and historical figures as well. So the best answer is option D. When we say panegyric, panegyric is a poem that praises someone, that celebrates someone. When we say lyric, lyric is a poem that is full of emotions, someone's personal thoughts. Okay. When we say ballad, ballad is a dramatic poem that is meant to be sung. So the answer to this question is definitely option D, epic. Question 7. So a poem of 8 rhyming lines is dash. So the answer to this question is option B, octave. So this shouldn't be hard for musical people, right? An octave, right? 8 lines. So quatrain is 4 lines. Sonnet is 14 lines. Limerick is a 5-line humorous poem. So the best answer to this question is option B, octave. Question 8. Okay, the events that make up the story is dash. The answer to this question is plot. Plot is the sequence of events, the arrangement of events of a literary work. It is the events that make up the story itself. Okay, so when we say setting, setting is the place and time of a literary work. So when we think of setting, we ask ourselves when and where did the story took place. Okay, when we say atmosphere, atmosphere is the emotional feeling associated with the literary work. Okay, so we start to look at the choice of word and we start to think of the tone and the mood, right? So when we say theme, theme is the central idea. So the best answer to this question is option A, plot. Question 9. The setting of the novel is dash. Now, this is a novel by Alex Unexpected Joy Are Done. It's such an interesting novel, okay? So, the novel is set in Nigeria and Ghana, and it's about Nitaki. Nitaki is Nigerian by blood, but Ghanaian by birth. He has lived all his life in Ghana, right? But he's forced to leave Ghana because he's considered as an illegal immigrant as a result of the alien compliance order in Ghana. So he leaves Ghana and goes to Nigeria. But he's not welcome in Nigeria either because he could not speak any of the Nigerian language. He has a tribal mark, which is typical of a Yoruba man, or cannot speak the Yoruba language. Okay, so the answer to this question is option A, Nigeria and Ghana. Question 10. Wachuk in the novel is that? So this is a question based on Alex Unexpected Joy Are Done. So this character was introduced in page 48, right? Chapter 9. So Wachuk is Idem's husband and is a shift worker in the printing house at Mafoluku. And we also learned that he lives in the same compound as Mama, right? So the answer to this question is option C, Idem's husband. And Idem is the cigarette seller, right? The wife to Wachuk. So the best answer to this question is option C, Idem's husband. Question 11. Okay, so in Songirl's Black Woman, the dominant literary device is dash. Now, Black Woman was written by Leopold Sedar Senghor, right? And this poem is about African beauty and African culture. Now, before the poem was written, beauty was attributed to the white people, to the Europeans. And so Leopold wanted to change this narrative. And he does this by doing what? Appreciating the African beauty as well as the African culture. Now that we have a background to this poem, let's go back to the question. The answer to this question is option D, metaphor. A lot of metaphor was used in this poem. What are metaphors? Metaphors are direct comparison. When you say A is B, you are a star. It's a metaphor, right? A heart of stone, it's a metaphor. You are comparing something directly. Web of lies is a metaphor. Now let's go to the poem. Now when you look at line 2,
clothed with your color, which is life. Your color, which is life, right? Your form, which is beauty, right? When you go down, you see naked woman, dark woman, firm fleshed, ripe fruit. She's compared to firm fleshed, ripe fruit. Okay, somber raptures of black wine. These are direct comparison. When you go down, right, you see your solemn contractive voice is spiritual song of the beloved. When you go down further, you see naked woman, black woman, oil that no breath ruffles, calm oil on the athlete's flank of the prince of Mali. These are all comparison. Okay, gazelle limbed in paradise. Under the shadow of your hair, my care is lightened by the neighboring suns of your eyes. These are all metaphor. Okay, so metaphor are used to describe the beauty of the African skin, of the African culture. Okay, so the answer to this question is no doubt option D. Question 12 says the song of the woman of my land is a dash. Now, the song of a woman of my land is a recommended poem and it is written by Umar Farouk Sesay. So, this poem talks about the plight of women in the society. You know, women work so hard to make ends meet, women even take care of the entire family, right? And this causes them pain and stress. Okay, so the poem also talks about, you know, the immortality of songs and immortality of life. So this means that humans will die but songs never die, right? And because of that, we get to learn about their struggles in their songs or in songs generally, right? So this is the background of the poem. Now that you understand this, the answer to this question is social poem. The poem is a social poem because it talks about the struggle, you know, the resilience, the virtue of, you know, women despite their suffering in the society. So it's a social poem. It's not a panegyric poem. And the reason why it's not a panegyric poem is because a panegyric poem is meant to celebrate, to honor, to, you know, appreciate, to praise, you know, someone. We get to feel happy and, you know, just basically happy and joyous about everything. But yeah, it's a tone of lamentation, you know. We feel sorrowful. We feel regretful when we read this poem. That's the mood and that's the tone in this poem. So it's not typical of a panegyric poem. So the best answer to this question is no doubt option C, social poem. Question 13. Now, in Eliot's Journey of the Magi, six hands at an open door is an example of dash. Now, the Journey of the Magi is written by T.S. Eliot, and this is a recommended poem. Now, this poem is an allegory. Now, what do I mean by allegory? Now, allegory is like a disguised message. Allegory uses characters, events, or the entire poem or story as a symbolic representation of something deeper, of a deeper meaning, a deeper concept, right, or a deeper idea. Right. So how did T.S. Eliot used allegory in this poem? Now, for Christians, you are aware of the story of the three wise men in the Bible. The three wise men went to visit baby Jesus at the time of his birth, right? Now, this journey is more like moving from the old way to a new spiritual world. And that is why the old poem talks about spiritual death and rebirth. That is what the journey represents. Let's go back to the question. Now, if you've read the poem, you know that six hands refer to three people standing at the door welcoming the Magi. Okay, and because we know that the answer to this question is synecdoche, because synecdoche is using a part, a physical part, to represent a whole. Okay, six hands, three people. Okay, so when we say irony is saying the opposite of what you mean. Alliteration is a repetition of initial consonant sound, and there is no initial consonant sound repeated in this line. Okay, when we say metonymy is using one thing as a substitute for something that is closely associated with it. Okay, so the answer to this question is definitely option A, synecdoche. Question 14. Okay, Oshundare is the leader and the lead is dash. The leader and the lead is a poem written by Niyi Oshundare, and this poem is a recommended poem that you need to read and analyze. Now, what does this poem talk about? Now, this poem is about leadership and followership in Africa, and according to Niyi, we need good leaders as much as we need good followers. So if you want to be a leader, you must first become a good follower. Okay, so that's what the poem is all about. Now, let's go back to the question. Dramatic. This poem is not dramatic. We can consider the Journey of the Magi, right, by T.S. Eliot as a dramatic monologue. So when we say something is dramatic, it would have the structure of a play, which this doesn't have. Okay, so it criticizes leadership. That is what the poem does. Okay, when we say satiric, this poem is satiric. Okay, it has satire. And when we say satire, it mocks, it criticizes, it shows us the flaw, it exposes the flaws of humans, be it political or social issues, right? Let me say narrative. Narrative tells a story. It tells a story, but the main focus is criticism. Okay, when we say elegiac, elegiac is from the word elegy, and it mourns the loss or death of someone, right? So the answer to this question is definitely option B. The poem criticizes by using animal imagery. So when you read the poem, you see lion, tiger mentioned in the poem. So these are typical animals that struggle for power, and that is what the poem criticizes. Okay, it criticizes the struggle for power, leadership style, right, by using animal imagery. Okay, this is a beautiful poem that you should read. So the best answer to this question is definitely option B. Question 15. Okay, so the poet persona in Donne's The Good Morrow reflects on dash. Now, this is another recommended poem. Okay, The Good Morrow is written by John Donne, and it's a poem about love as an eternal experience, an everlasting and unchanging experience. So, according to the poem, love is not just a physical thing. Okay, it's a spiritual and intellectual experience, making it immortal and unchanging. Now, let's go to the question. Option A, spiritual love. Yes, the poem talks about deep love, but the focus is more on the fact that it is unchanging. And so the answer to this question is option B, the immortality of love. Now, the poem does not talk about falling in love. It also doesn't talk about marriage. Okay, so the best answer to this question is immortality of love. Option B is the final answer to this question. Question 16. The style of Chibuike's a government driver on his retirement is dash. Okay, so a government driver on his retirement is another recommended poem, and it's a poem written by Chibuike Ono. Okay, so this is a poem that I find very interesting and kind of hilarious, and I'll tell you why. So this is a poem about a government driver who, after many years of driving carefully and service to the government, decides to retire. Now, on the day of his retirement, right, he drinks recklessly, drives carelessly, and he dies in an accident. Okay, so in my head, I'm like, so you can drive other people carefully, but you drove yourself to death. So this is why I find it funny. Okay, so let's go back to the question. The answer to this question is option A, narrative. So the poem tells a story, and you can feel that with my summary. Okay, you can see the sequence of events as you read the poem. Okay, monologic means monologue, right? A monologue is a long speech by a person. Okay, and it's not a monologue. Okay, reflective, it is not reflective. Option D, panegyric. Panegyric is a poem that praises someone. It doesn't praise the driver in any way. So the answer to this question is option A, narrative. Question 17. The excerpt above from Angelo's Cage Bird imply that cage bird that. Now, but a cage bird stands on the grave of dreams. This is the excerpt. Okay, now the cage bird is written by Maya Angelou, and this is also a recommended text that you should read and analyze. Okay, so the poem describes a cage bird. Now, the bird is trapped, and all it can do is to sing about the freedom it has never gotten. Okay, so the poem is basically about freedom versus captivity. It's also about oppression, because the poem uses what is called an extended metaphor to describe the oppression of the black people. Okay, now let's go back to the question. Cage bird will die. So this is not the answer to this question, because it does not mean that the bird will literally die. Okay, option B, will be frustrated. Now, this is the answer to this question, because the situation creates a sense of frustration and helplessness, because the bird is not free to do what other free birds can do. It cannot actualize its dream. Its dream is basically crushed. Okay, that is what it means in the excerpt. So this is the answer to the question. Stand on its grave. Stand on its grave will now have a literal interpretation if you decide to take option C as the final answer, which is not the case. The bird is trapped, so it can't stand on its grave. Option D, walks freely to actualize his dream. This is not the answer, because the bird is actually trapped. It's not free to do other things or do what it wants to do. So the answer to this question is option B, will be frustrated. Question 18. So Lawrence Bat is a dash. Now, Bat is another recommended poem, and it is written by D.H. Lawrence. Okay, so what's the poem all about? Now, the poem is about the mysterious nature of bat. Okay, it talks about the behavior of bat, especially its night activity. Okay, so that's what the poem is all about. Now, let's go back to the question. Sarcasm. Now, sarcasm is about mockery, saying the opposite of what is meant, and that's not what the poem is all about. Okay, when we say satire, satire is to criticize, and this poem does not criticize the bats, it does not criticize the society. Okay, so when we say dramatic monologue, it's a conversation between two persons, right, two people, and there is no dialogue in this poem. When we say dramatic monologue, monologue is a speech by one person, and we can see that a single voice is expressing its thoughts and emotion about the bat. So the best answer to this question is option D, dramatic monologue. Question 19. So Lakunle declines to pay bride price on CD because it sees tradition as dash. So this is a play by Wole Soyinka titled The Lion and the Jewel, and we can find this in page 7. So the answer to this question is option C, barbaric. Now, Lakunle expressed his interest in marrying CD, but CD insisted that he had to pay a bride price. Now, Lakunle declined, saying that the tradition is barbaric. Now, let's read from the text itself. Now, CD says, "They will sell as no virgin, that I was forced to sell my shame and marry you without a price." Now, Lakunle replies her, "A savage custom, barbaric, outdated, rejected, denounced, accursed, excommunicated, archived, degrading, humiliating, unspeakable, redundant, retrogressive, remarkable, unpalatable." Then CD says in return, "Is the bag empty? Why did you stop?" You know, while we would describe Baruka as the lion, CD as the jewel, right? Lakunle is definitely a clown. So the best answer to this question is option C, barbaric. Question 20. The play is dash. Okay, so this is a play by Wole Soyinka titled The Lion and the Jewel. It's a recommended text that you should read. Okay, so the answer to this question is option A, comedy. Why is it comedy? The play features humor, satire, and exaggerated characters. When we say humor in the sense that we can see all of Baruka's corny scheme, right, just to get CD. We see Lakunle's westernized ideas, okay, all of which provide humor. When we speak of satire, right, we can see that there's a clash between modernity and tradition, right, in an African society. Right, exaggerated character in the sense that Baruka is serving as the lion, CD is serving as the jewel, right? While Lakunle represents modernity. When we say tragic comedy, it mixes tragedy and comedy. So there's no serious tragedy in this place. So that's not the answer to this question. When we say farce is a type of comedy and it has exaggerated characters, but then there are silly behaviors. For example, Mr. Bean. Yes, we can call that a farce, okay? So when we speak of melodrama has, emotional conflict or exaggerated dramatic conflicts. So that's not the answer to this question. So the best answer to this question is definitely option A, comedy.
So guys, we've concluded today's tutorial. We saw 20 questions and I'm sure you've learned so much, right? So when next you see similar questions, you will be able to tackle them. And I'm so proud of you. Thank you for staying tuned. And till I see you in my next video, please do not forget to give me a like. Do well to subscribe and share with your friends. Bye.